The power of meeting in a circle isn't new. For most of human history, our ancestors came together in circles as a common form of governance to build bridges and even spark movements for change. Talking circles are safe and all contributions are equal. Consensus is more important than time. There is no hierarchy. Everybody listens. Everyone belongs. As the world stares resolutely into the face of widespread global injustices, the need for honest, bold conversation has never been greater. To celebrate what unites us and overcome what divides us. And when we see injustice, we can't fall in line. We must form circles.
This lesson has been learned constantly by other people in the civil rights movement, in the women's movement.
I'm Rebecca Dopp, founder of Exponent. For generations, Gloria Steinem's New York City apartment has hosted thousands of talking circles and brought people from all walks of life to meet in her home and speak their minds. And the power of these circles can be world-shifting.
50 years of talking circles have happened here for various reasons. The start of Ms. Magazine, the National Women's Political Caucus.
Gloria knows the best way to solve a problem is to do more listening than speaking, to learn as you lead. The next iteration of Talking Circles will bring new leading voices to her living room, knowing what was will be again.
Just sitting there and seeing the change of mood, the confidence, the kind of transformation that comes from being in a circle was a huge lesson, a life lesson.
A place for world leaders, activists, children, and everyone in between to make change from the inside out.
So if you want to have a talking circle, I'm your person. Call me up.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
When you think about the media, what do you think of? Because I think age-wise, we think about different forms of media, right?
Yeah. Social media, movies, I think that's what I consume the most. And that's what I want to have my life in.
Yeah, movies too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Do people have other definitions of media?
Well, my definition of media is just kind of always newspapers first and then actual news, just because when I grew up, in a lot of my classes, we had to do current events, so it's always buy the newspaper, read it fully, especially the New York Times, and actually consume what's happening in the world, So I always think of newspapers first.
And do you read the newspaper?
Not as much anymore. I have the New York Times app on my phone, so that's how I do it. I don't physically buy it anymore, which is a shame because I love paper. I still write things down.
Do you sort of talk to yourself while you're reading the newspaper? Why don't they cover this? And why don't
I think I do afterwards. I'm very much consume everything first, form my thoughts, and then I'll have a mental conversation about it.
It's interesting that you say that because with newspapers, they're set up in a way where you can find stories that you wouldn't otherwise see. And part of consuming the New York Times through the app is you're actually getting the top line, and you don't have the opportunity to not only turn the pages, which is very gratifying and lovely, but also to find those stories you wouldn't otherwise find. And so I think it's a challenge for all of us in media to make sure that we can continue to tell those stories that aren't necessarily the the stories that get the most clicks, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. It's very curated. Like, I think the first pages are for you,
Yes.
know, and the way that algorithms work, they're kind of, like you mentioned, generated to, okay, you've looked at this, so all of this might interest you, but, it is good to read the things that don't interest you, because that's where you'll find, like, the meat and, like, the gravitas of things.
And also what isn't there that pisses you off.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And that's what the good stuff is.
And those are the stories we want to tell.
Yeah.
For me, media has changed so much in recent years. I feel like my definition of it has kind of been changing along with it. I used to consider it news, like you were just saying, but now I think media for me is just storytelling, whether it's from a podcast or from a TV show or a movie. But that's my favorite part of it, to tell our struggles and our triumphs and share experiences with other people.
Yeah, the narrative is the key, really. I mean, that's what our brains are organized around, stories, right?
I agree with everything that they've all said. I think my definition of media definitely has changed since I was younger, but I have a journalism background. I majored in journalism in my undergrad, so newspapers for me definitely was like the forefront of what I believed media always was. But I love movies, I love TV, I love all the streaming platforms, and I think that's kind of what I love about media is, like, there's so many different ways to consume it and so many different types of media. It's like, it's so different and it's always changing.
And they have an internal clock in a way. I mean, there was a philosopher named Suzanne Langer who, because she was a woman philosopher, means nobody knows who she was, but she was a great philosopher, right? who said that every art form has an intrinsic time. A book is time past by its form, even though it may be science fiction, but its form tells you it's time past. And plays are time present, as they're happening in front of you. And movies are dreams. And that's what, gives them their power.
It's a really good analogy. I like it.
And you all are, do you all know each other?
I'm the odd one out.
Yeah, the three of us. Right. So
The three of us know, I knew of Julia from our master's program.
Okay.
Marissa goes to Fordham for undergrad.
So we met last week, and we met her today.
And the three of us met for coffee this morning, so.
Yeah, well, that's part of our purpose, that we all get to meet each other, right? Right.
and you're some of you are in a graduate program, so you're serious about media.
Yes.
And the business side specifically?
For me, it's kind of, I just finished my master's in marketing intelligence, and now I want to apply what I know from marketing intelligence and from my background in business to the media industry. So that's, was more focused on my knowledge and skills, and now the media is because I want to go to that industry.
Interesting.
And I'm in the graduate program too, so I'm really interested in entertainment, specifically working for like one of the bigger entertainment companies and marketing, corporate communications, something around that. But I just started the program. We're only 2 weeks in, so I'm excited to learn more and like kind of tailor that to like what I'm really interested in doing.
Is it a 2-year program or
It's a 1.5 year program.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll have to answer that question sooner rather than
I'm at a bit of a crossroads, I think, with media. I had a news internship in the spring, and I really enjoyed it, but with recent events, I've been kind of thinking about my career and what direction I want to take it, and if there's something like a little deeper I can get at. So I'm still super interested in entertainment, but I'm seeing it as more of an arc of a career, and maybe that will come later. But right now I'm just working with, great people, helping people have better opportunities at their jobs and whatnot. So like I said, at a bit of a crossroads.
What about that news internship made you pivot?
It's all consuming, I think. And the station that I worked at was great and everyone was super nice, but they, especially in this climate, said it was not easy, and we're kind of saying you really have to love it to do it. So it was a good experience, and I might get there one day, but there are other things I would explore before.
What was the hard part?
The hard part for them, a lot of complaints coming in just from people, watching about the way they report their news. And I think the other scary thing, at least in a career setting, is there's many jobs that are not that glamorous at the beginning stage, like working at, a news station and you're covering traffic and whatnot. And then at kind of the highest pinnacle of that career, you're on, you're broadcasting from Washington, D.C. And that long journey is kind of intimidating, I think, If I could do it on the Hill, that would be amazing. But it's a long journey. It's intimidating being a young woman and thinking about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel, just looking at the population, do you still feel it's too male and too white and, right, just visually?
Right. Yes, I am seeing a little more representation, which I appreciate, but I think even deeper than just looking at the news industry, it's like internalized of what I can do as a young woman. So, yeah.
And that's from, what do you think of when you say that? I mean, just what you see in the culture, what your family told you.
Yeah, not my family. I think what I see in the culture, I think it's a lot of it's even subconscious, and it just kind of came up as we were sitting here. I think, that's a question I would love to ask you. How did you believe that you could do these extraordinary things? There's such a gap, and it's kind of hard to get there. So I would love to pick your brain.
Well, I didn't. No, I mean, it's kind of one day at a time, right. And if you really care about something, you're mad about some crazed injustice or two people who should be working together and are not, or I don't know, whatever, that kind of urgency is what keeps you going. And then a day at a time and a day at a time, but it's the substance. I mean, I never, ever imagined that I would be able to continue, my life as a freelancer until this advanced age. Hello, and no. I didn't know what was going to happen. And that may be one of the differences, I don't know, you tell me, between when we're beginning and when we're on the way. We realize that there's not one way or the right way. There's your way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it just keeps changing, right?
And do you feel that you have to have it all mapped out?
I kind of do. I mean, I'm going back to college later in life. Mm-hmm. I will be 32 next week, and I'm a junior pursuing my bachelor's actually in history. So kind of to pivot back, I don't have I wouldn't say a real connection, but my, studies isn't really media focused. It's more history focused, and just kind of. It's
actual facts as opposed to. Right.
And just kind of
What is there part of history you love?
I love medieval Renaissance history, specifically Plantagenet Tudor history.
Oh, that's so fascinating.
Yeah. So.
But that's great. And how did you plunge into that? Accidentally, or?
Well, reading a lot. My favorite type of books are kind of if it's not historical fiction, it's kind of 18th century British literature. It's kind of weird and out there, but it's what I like. And speaking about books being the past, books are a way to get lost in yourself, or just lost to the world. And you're just consuming so much information, so much of it is different than yours. And I don't know, it's just interesting. And I think through my studies, just kind of finding myself in history has always been hard. So that's kind of shifting and focus what I want to do with history is just to tell history from perspectives that if it doesn't necessarily look like me, then just kind of digesting history from somebody that is not the norm. When you go to museums today, it's a lot of older white males, maybe some older white females. You don't really see people that look like you, and it can be intimidating. And history is not intimidating. Everybody should know history, whether you're Brazilian, whether you're from Florida. Everybody has history.
Maybe not Florida.
Everybody has history, and it's important to know it, however you digest it or not. And I think that just really speaks to what's happening, in the world today. We're here, we're talking with you, and you have so much history, and there's so much to learn from the past to inform the future. You can't know where you're going without looking to the back. I had a class yesterday, and not yesterday, I'm sorry, Friday, and we were talking about Petrarch, and he's considered one of the first humanists. And one of the things that he did was he wrote to people from the past. That was his way of kind of digesting their information and making it relevant to him. And, that's what we should do today. As we're trying to make moves and strides in the world, don't forget where you come from and use that to kind of inform where you're going.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if we'll ever really have world literature. We don't, obviously. I mean, it's so, because of colonial whatever, it's so European based here. When we all started in Africa, that's where people started. So how come we don't start history there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's perspective, even I learned a really cool thing about maps. I really didn't realize that, but technically speaking, the map they were looking at, the size is wrong, and I never, and I never really knew that. And you always hear, history, and it's told by the victors and it's written by the people who won, and that, not changes the narrative, but that informs the narrative, as you were saying earlier, and we can't try to change things if we're not a part of the narrative. So I think really we just have to find our places. And you were talking about like your internship, and, things are going to be hard, but it's important to just kind of realize like substance, why you're there, what you're trying to do in order to kind of go forward.
Well, I hope it's better in your day than in mine, because in mine, it was almost all European history. And I got interested in and ended up going to India for 2 years because there was a 1 semester course by a woman who just happened to have worked there. It was a complete accident. Otherwise, it wasn't there. And we, if the world were 100 people, I think only 20 would be, from Europe or here, and everybody else would be from Africa or Asia. I mean, I don't know if we're ever going to get over that.
I think from your generation, I think it's a bit better, but maybe not still as inclusive.
Yeah, I can just tell my story about Brazil. And we normally in school study Brazil from when Portugal got there. But there was already life there.
Yes, hello.
Yeah. way before.
Okay, I rest my case. That's a good example. What? That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you always say that what we learn about history is like 1/10 of human history.
Yeah. Well, there are two things: history and the past, and they are not the same. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I rest my case.
Well, it's the same thing when we talk about Africa. A lot of people start Africa with the transatlantic slave trade, but we know that there are thriving civilizations there. We have Timbuktu, we have Mali. We have these great empires of the past that informed Europe.
In fact, that's where all civilization began, right?
Yeah. But nobody talks about that. Like when people view Africa, talking about media, the general assumption is that they're poor, they're dirty, they're downtrodden. It's feed the children. They need our money to survive. But all of that is just based on colonialism. Europe came in and kind of stripped all their resources and left. And they didn't know how to pick themselves back up. But, again, just it's important to know that, that it just doesn't start with Portugal. It doesn't just start with the transatlantic slave trade. Like there's history before that. And it's just good to know.
No, and even, I mean, we're now doing it by territory, by Africa, and, where it's especially obvious and especially political. But it's true on every continent. I mean, before Europeans showed up here, we are in Manhattan, which is Mannahatta Island, and there were what came to be called Native American cultures that were and are incredibly sophisticated in terms of medicine, philosophy, construction of huge, settlements bigger than anything in Europe before it was there. I mean, it's so limited what we're learning, and we're counting on you to unlimit it.
Well, you knew that there was a greater. I mean, you got angry that it just started.
Yeah, because like actually my name is Julia Ururahy, which is like native Brazilian name, and I grew up wanting to know more about it. I found out that actually it was a Portuguese family that moved to Brazil and adopted like a Brazilian name. Mm-hmm. So it's a very shallow story. But I was always like eager to know more about that. Like all the neighborhoods in Brazil have like native Brazilian names, and that's, I mean, I'm always wanting to know more about that, and we don't have a lot,
mm-hmm. But there's still cultures that represent it, right?
Yes.
Is there enough contact? Is that the problem?
No.
Yeah.
So the thing is, now it's very touristy. Like there are some cultures in Amazonia, and you can reach them. Some you can't, and they want to be like that. They are like completely apart from technology and everything. But some you can go there. You can like spend a week there. But is it really how it is?
Yeah, right.
Because like it became like a tourist attraction. So yeah, it's actually something that I really want to go. I really want to go to Amazon and like explore a little.
But at least they
have
protected the natural resources and protected the trees and so on, did they not?
Yeah,
or at least,
yes, but with the fires, with the Amazon fires and everything, like it's getting harder and harder to find like nature. I mean, Amazon is still huge, but a lot of those communities are gone by now because of the fires. And the fires are happening because they want to create like cows, because Brazil exports meat. So yeah, everything comes back to politics.
Well, the Amazon is called the Amazon, theoretically at least, because there were these groups of powerful women.
Yes.
Who lived in caves and who represented Amazons.
Yeah.
So there's a little hope.
Yes, and we still have a lot of that in the Brazilian culture. Like medicine, I think we kind of merged everything, but we don't stop. Like there's a lot of like Black history, like African history, Portuguese, native Brazilian, but we don't try to understand why. We just like, it's part of our history. That's it.
It's so interesting to figure out why, since we're all ending up with colonialism here and internally or externally, or not ending up with it, but focusing, why that happened. And I think, probably a historian would, not appreciate what I'm about to say. But I think that European culture, or the culture in Europe, was agricultural and, very nature-oriented and so on. And the healthcare workers, you might say, the healers were women. And they, attended at births and performed abortions and, sort of gave women control of their own bodies. But as patriarchy and monotheism came along, then they became, very much the adversaries and became known as witches and bad people and stuff like that. So it's interesting to look before that and see what existed. Because if it hadn't been for monotheism and patriarchy and all of that, Europe would not have got overpopulated, by taking away the means not to have children. It's so overpopulated that it became colonial and started to, go to all of our other continents, right? So it all starts with us. If we have control of our own physical, so really, to me, that's the first step in democracy.
Yeah, I was going to say, going back to the, the narrative of your history, I do feel that we are on the cusp of a new era where they're retelling those stories. And I don't know if anyone else feels the same way. I think with, Kamala Harris, she'll be the first woman on, walls, hopefully in classrooms and in textbooks. And the arc of history is really long, but I have some hope because I do think we are on the turning page.
I agree with that. I also think that it's hard to try to change someone's mind and perception. I mean, there's a whole big debate going on about critical race theory and about how it's just not true. How could you, retell our history, or how could you add this into there? And it's not added into it. It just wasn't told before,
right.
So I agree that, with the way the tide that's going, it's a more opening up to going back again to different narratives that weren't available before, and I do see that, and I'm grateful for that because it is needed, again, circling back, Brazil was Brazil, or, maybe another name natively, but it was there before Portugal got there. Africa was there before Europeans got there. Every other single country existed before Europe. They are not the center of the world, they like to think they are.
Yeah,
I do not understand the whole, well, I sort of understand the rebellion against critical race theory. I mean, I don't get it. I mean,
Gloria's good friend, Kimberly Crenshaw, is the mother of critical race theory. She's also the mother of intersectionality. And I think that there's a rebellion against this thinking that, stories were not told correctly, and we need to retell it. But there's a threatening of status quo, which is, I think, pushing against critical race theory, also pushing against intersectionality.
It's insane.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
People are here. Hello. I mean, right. Right.
I think that pushback is discouraging and it's so present, but I think also the fact that it's here is what, it's part of the conversation. That's what gives me some hope for it.
Yeah. I know Gloria used to say when she was traveling, when we were all traveling more, that people would come up to her and say, a Black person took my job. And she would say, who said it was your job?
Yeah, right. It's the my that's the problem.
Yeah. And I think that in
Or a woman took my job, a guy would say, yeah.
And I think in schools there is this fear of imparting one history is taking away from another history. It's like we're just adding to the conversation and adding to what had been a pretty limited interpretation of history, of the present, of whatever it was. But it's, for some people, they only see it as addition is dilution of what was there. And
and really changing the power structure.
Yeah,
that's right.
I mean, all those white guys who invaded the Capitol with their red hats on were, clearly mad because they felt they were losing control, and it was unfair control, right? And it's the same with the anti-abortion movement. That women dare to have control of our own physical selves. Well, I think we're all in the same stage of impatience, right?
yeah.
So maybe we should not complain so much, but figure out what we're going to do, what subversive things.
Yeah.
What are you doing now that you feel energized by, that feels like it's maybe making a change? I don't mean to direct it. Yeah, right.
Lately, I have been trying to get myself to do things before I feel ready, and that's been really, really empowering. To do things that I think other people might judge or might find dumb or whatever, to just do them anyway.
Just do it. Right.
Yeah, and it's from those things that I ended up here. So they've paid massive dividends. So I just kind of learned my lesson in the sweetest way, which is just,
That's great. Is there an example that comes to mind? Maybe the first thing, or just the typical thing?
I started a blog at the beginning of quarantine. It's called A Seat at the Table, kind of the same idea that we have here, just that everyone has a voice and that we all deserve to be a part of the things that are going on around us and be knowledgeable about them. And then that turned into a podcast, and then that turned into more opportunities. And like I said, I'm here now, but every time before I hit publish, I think to myself, this is stupid. No one's going to read it. No one's going to listen. But then you just do it anyway. And
that's great. Do it anyway. It's a great motto.
Yeah.
Right.
It works.
Yeah.
And it was Shirley Chisholm who said, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a chair.
Yeah, and I really relate to what Marissa said. So by being here, like, this is not my native language, so I would always second guess myself.
We feel, don't we all feel kind of inferior? Completely bilingual.
No, but I always second guess myself and just by being here and throwing myself out there, and it was something that I told the media management students when we were at orientation, like, just do it. Just put your shyness in a little box and your like doubt and everything, and do it, because like nobody will do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if I want to succeed here, being an immigrant, I mean, I have to take all the opportunities I can. I have to take an internship, take GA-ships, take everything that I can to make myself more valuable and stand out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what I'm doing and that is making me feel better.
No, that's great.
Do you want to stay here?
Yeah.
Yeah. And just kind of on the same wavelength as everybody else, kind of the same thing. I mentioned earlier, I'm going back to school later in life, so very often I kind of suffer from imposter syndrome. Even being here today, I've only started any form of public advocacy maybe last year in my college, but it's because I went back to school. I said yes to doing that, being in my 30s, and then even being there, taking the classes, working full time, it's a lot, but, you just kind of have to do it. You kind of make yourself uncomfortable, because you have to just realize at the end of the day, you're trying to better yourself, to better other people, to better the world, even if you don't think that it's impactful right away. Somebody will see something, I'm pretty sure in your podcast and your blog, like someone will read it or hear it and be like, I felt that way too. And then they feel seen and they feel heard, and that's always a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And your experience from 18 to 30 is probably very valuable, right? Things other students don't know, right?
Yeah. I really think that going back to school later in life was more beneficial to me. I don't think that I would have been as productive or as focused and aware of the things when I'm 18 going to college. When I came in today, I was actually like on a Zoom class, because I had it at 9:30, so I was in the cab right over listening to it, and it's things like that I probably would not have done, when I was younger. I wouldn't have really seen this opportunity as the opportunity that it is and made it work. Something would have had to have given, and, I might have said no, I was like, oh, that's too much, I can't do all those things. But, when you're passionate about things, you figure it out, you make it work.
It has been an honor sharing virtual space with you. Please check out exponent.org to learn more. We'd love to hear from you.